Aiden stepped onto the wide wooden stage of the Cebu International Auditorium with the quiet fear of someone who had spent most of his life trying not to be noticed. The overhead lights warmed his face, but his hands remained cold as he clutched the microphone. His shoes were scuffed, his shirt a little too big, his jacket borrowed from a charity shop back in Ireland. You could read his poverty in every thread he wore, yet the determination in his eyes burned brighter than any spotlight. He cleared his throat, barely above a whisper, and introduced himself. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd, curiosity mixed with doubt. A few audience members leaned forward, trying to understand the accented voice of the boy who looked as if life had already been heavy on his shoulders. The judges watched him closely. The first judge narrowed his eyes, unsure. The second judge leaned back, unimpressed by his timid posture. The third judge studied him with gentle curiosity, as if sensing something fragile beneath the surface. "I grew up with nothing," Aiden said, his voice trembling but honest. "But Elvis, his music made me feel like the world wasn't so cruel." The room fell into perfect stillness. Even backstage crew paused to listen. The opening chords of "Can't Help Falling in Love" floated gently across the hall. Aiden inhaled, closed his eyes for the briefest moment, and then sang. His first note stopped the world. A warm, velvet tone filled the room, rich and astonishing, nothing like the boy who had walked in looking like life had taken more than it ever gave. The audience gasped, some shot upright in their seats. A few hands flew to mouths, stunned by the unexpected beauty in his voice. It wasn't just singing, it was the sound of someone who had held on to music the way a drowning man holds onto a piece of wood. One judge stiffened, eyes widening in disbelief. Another leaned forward, as if pulled by an invisible thread. The third pressed a hand to her heart, her chin trembling. The crowd erupted, unable to hold their reaction. People shouted, screamed, clapped, and cheered, though Aiden continued as if he couldn't hear them. His eyes shimmered with emotion, remembering nights singing under cold Irish streetlights for spare coins, singing to forget hunger, singing to dream. The more he sang, the louder Cebu responded. Lights glimmered off the tears of strangers who felt the sincerity in every word he released. By the time he reached the first chorus, the once skeptical judge had tears in his eyes. In that moment, Aiden wasn't poor, wasn't invisible. He was a star rising in front of their eyes, and Cebu embraced him with a roar that shook the hall. Halfway through the song, Aiden felt something shift inside him, something deep, painful, and powerful. His voice trembled not from fear but from the weight of everything he had lived through. The memories of cold Irish nights, when he sang under flickering streetlights just to distract himself from an empty stomach, rose up with every lyric. The Cebu audience didn't know his whole story, but they felt it. They felt the honesty pouring out of him like a tide he could no longer hold back. His voice cracked slightly as he reached the softer lines, but instead of sounding weak, it carried a raw emotion that tightened the chest of every person listening. The camera zoomed in close enough to catch the glimmer in his eyes, tears he refused to let fall yet. Under the harsh stage lights, that single shimmer broke the hearts of everyone watching. The judges were no longer composed professionals evaluating a contestant. They were human beings caught in the gravity of a moment they couldn't look away from. Judge 1, the strict one known for rarely showing emotion, blinked rapidly and pressed a knuckle against the corner of his eye. He tried to pretend he was just adjusting his glasses, but the watery shine exposed him. Judge 2, who had leaned back skeptically before, now leaned forward so far his elbows touched the table. His jaw hung slightly open, softened by disbelief. Judge 3, the empathetic one, shook her head slowly, her lip trembling as she whispered something no one could hear. Aiden sensed all of it, and it only made him sing harder. As he lifted his head to face the crowd, he saw thousands of Cebuano faces lit by stage lights, some smiling, others crying, some with hands clasped over their hearts. He had never in his life seen so many people look at him with warmth. Back in Ireland, he had been invisible, a poor boy drifting through streets where no one stopped long enough to see him. But here, in a city he had never visited before, strangers were loving him without reservation. A woman in the front row broke down first. She covered her mouth and sobbed into her friend's shoulder. A young man beside her raised both hands, shaking them in the air as if surrendering to the beauty of the moment. Even the security guards, who were trained to stay neutral, slowed their patrols, eyes fixed on the stage. Judge 2 couldn't contain himself anymore. He pushed back his chair, stood up, and shouted across the hall, "You're not just singing Elvis, you're living him." His voice boomed with excitement and emotion, the kind that can't be faked. Judge 3 wiped her cheek, tears slipping freely now. "The soul in your voice," she whispered, overwhelmed. "It hurts and heals at the same time." Aiden felt those words hit him like a wave. His voice grew stronger, more confident, soaring into the next line with a depth that only someone who had known both hunger and hope could express. The crowd rose again, the applause swelling so loudly that the walls of the Cebu auditorium seemed to tremble. And Aiden, for the first time in his life, felt what it was like to be truly seen. As the final note left Aiden's lips, it hung suspended in the air like a fragile piece of glass, light, trembling, and achingly beautiful. For a heartbeat, Cebu International Auditorium fell into complete silence. It was the kind of silence that comes only after something extraordinary, the kind where the audience forgets to breathe, afraid of breaking the spell too soon. Then the entire hall exploded. The roar of applause hit Aiden like a wave. People leapt from their seats, cheering, screaming, clapping with everything they had. The sound shook the floor beneath him. It echoed off the walls, ricocheted toward the stage, and wrapped around him in a storm of love he had never known. He staggered back a step, overwhelmed, before steadying himself on the microphone stand. Tears streamed down faces everywhere. A middle-aged man in the second row wiped both cheeks with his sleeve, laughing through his crying. A group of teenagers jumped up and down, waving their arms wildly. Even grandparents stood, clapping with trembling hands, their eyes shining. Back in Ireland, Aiden had sung on cold streets where people walked past him without noticing. Here, in Cebu, thousands looked at him as if he were made of pure light. He lowered the microphone slowly, his chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. "Is this real?" he whispered, barely audible, his voice cracking with disbelief. It wasn't a question for the audience or the judges, it was a question for himself, for the boy who had spent years believing he wasn't good enough. The judges rose from their seats almost in unison. Judge 1, the strict one, clapped above his head with tears streaming openly now. His stoic mask had shattered completely. That was unbelievable," he said, voice thick. Judge 2 pointed at Aiden with dramatic intensity, his voice breaking as he shouted, "This is why we judge. This is why we're here. To witness moments like this." He wiped his face, but more tears came anyway. Judge 3 trembled visibly as she reached for the golden buzzer. Her hand hovered for a second, shaking with emotion. She wasn't just pressing a button, she was giving a blessing. When her palm finally came down, the golden buzzer ignited the hall. Confetti burst from the ceiling like a shower of stars, swirling around Aiden in brilliant, sparkling waves. The crowd screamed even louder, voices blending into one unstoppable roar. The floor vibrated beneath the thunder of applause. Aiden fell to his knees, unable to stand under the weight of emotion. The confetti coated his hair, his clothes, the stage around him, as if the world itself had crowned him with gold. His hands covered his face as he cried, real, raw, grateful tears. The crowd began chanting, thousands of voices uniting. Aidan! 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 The sound washed over him again and again, lifting him higher than he ever thought he could rise. And in that moment, a poor boy from Ireland, who once sang for coins on cold streets, found himself embraced by an entire city. Cebu didn't just cheer for him. They claimed him. They believed in him. They made his dream real.